Hey everyone, and welcome back to Empower Your English, the place where we connect yoga. Welcome to the deep dive. Thanks for joining us today. We are going deep, like really deep, into something that I think is going to resonate with a lot of you. The profound connection between music and, our feelings, our emotional well-being. And to really bring this to life, we're exploring it through the incredible journey of Steven Tyler of Aerosmith.
Yeah, I think what's so captivating about this deep dive is how a single life, Steven Tyler's story, can actually illuminate this kind of universal truth about just how powerful music is. It really gets you thinking about how sound impacts us, like on this fundamental level.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, you've brought in some really compelling material, podcast transcripts, and they really delve into the role of music in emotional wellness. And of course, we've got to talk about the roller coaster history of Aerosmith itself. I mean, what a story, right?
Absolutely, and they're definitely intertwined.
So we're going to unpack these sources, and we're going to try to understand how music can be, not just something fun to listen to, but a real force for healing and resilience.
Yeah.
And Steven Tyler's very public struggles, and of course his ultimate triumphs, offer a fascinating lens through which to view all of this. And again, I think this goes beyond just the wild world of rock and roll. This is about a fundamental human experience, finding solace and strength through sound.
And it's crucial to remember, as we go deep into Steven Tyler's story, that his experiences with addiction and recovery, while they're specific to him, they touch on these broader themes of human vulnerability and the search for well-being. It really prompts us to think about what resources we all turn to in challenging times.
Right.
What are our lifelines?
Okay, so to really unpack this, we've got to start with Steven Tyler himself. I mean, he's not just a rock icon with that totally unmistakable voice. I mean, come on, that voice. His life story really embodies this theme of struggle and redemption that we're talking about. Born in 1948, he was a driving force behind forming Aerosmith in Boston in the early 1970s.
Yeah, and if you think about the bigger picture here, the early 70s were this incredibly fertile ground for new sounds in rock music, and Boston became a key city in that whole movement. I mean, you had this explosion of creative energy happening there.
Oh, totally. And Aerosmith, they didn't waste any time making their mark. Early hits like Dream On and Sweet Emotion, these propelled them to fame so quickly by the late 70s. These songs, they were anthems, They defined an era. I mean, when you hear that opening piano riff of Dream On, you instantly know it, right?
Absolutely. And thinking about Dream On for a second, the lyrical themes in that song, dreams, perseverance, this yearning for something more, they likely resonated deeply with listeners and perhaps even mirrored some of Tyler's own internal drives and ambitions, even back then.
That's a really interesting connection. And, this rapid ascent to fame, it often creates this immense pressure on artists. And we see this with so many artists. It can, unfortunately, coincide with the rise of really difficult personal struggles.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right? Given the immense pressure of early fame, what are the psychological factors at play that might make artists in particular more susceptible to things like addiction? It's complex, right? It's this interplay of constantly performing, being under this intense scrutiny, and often there's this lack of a stable, grounding environment.
And that's exactly what happened with Tyler, right? Parallel to Aerosmith's success, you have his growing battle with addiction to drugs and alcohol. It really paints a picture of the excesses, of that time in rock history.
And it makes you think about the connection, or at least wonder about the connection between that really intense creative energy that you find in so many artists and, the potential for self-destructive behaviors. Could they be two sides of the same coin in some way?
It's a really thought-provoking question for sure. And it all came to a head in 1979, a near-fatal overdose at the Sunset Marquis Hotel in Los Angeles. This was a huge starting point for him, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A critical moment, a real juncture. It highlights just how fragile life is, even amidst, seemingly untouchable stardom. It forces you to confront your own mortality.
Yeah. He was really lucky to survive that. And it became clear, to everyone that he had to make some major changes in his life. Now, what's really striking is that even during those dark times, during his struggles, Tyler's passion for music never went away. In fact, it became absolutely essential in his recovery.
This speaks to that inherent human connection with music that we all have. It's often a source of comfort, stability, even in the midst of chaos. It's almost like this constant, this anchor that you can always return to.
Right. It's like music shifted from, potentially fueling that rock and roll lifestyle to becoming a genuine source of comfort, a coping mechanism, and ultimately his therapy.
And the therapeutic power of music, I mean, this is something that resonates across cultures and time. It provides an outlet for emotions that can be difficult to express in other ways. It's like a language without words in many ways.
And that's what it seems to have been for Tyler, right? Through his music, through that incredible voice in his songs, he could process and release those really difficult emotions he was carrying. You can almost hear the pain and the release in some of his performances from that era.
It's a form of emotional catharsis. The act of creating and performing, it can be incredibly liberating. You're taking this inner turmoil, this pain, and transforming it into something external, something you can share.
And it wasn't just something he did privately, right? His continued performing career actually became part of this self-healing process. He was using his creativity to manage both the emotional and even physical pain that he experienced later on.
This highlights the active role that individuals can take in their own healing journey. Engaging with creative outlets, whatever they might be, can be a powerful tool for agency and self-discovery. It gives you back a sense of control.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Our sources bring in some scientific perspective on all of this.
Yeah.
They mentioned Dr. Richard Davidson, a neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin, and he found that music actually activates specific regions in the brain. And these regions are involved in, get this, emotion regulation and stress management.
So we're seeing how intuitively, music was this lifeline for Tyler, right?
Hmm.
And what's fascinating is that now science is helping us understand why this is the case. These neurological findings gives a tangible basis for the impact music has on us, on our feelings.
Exactly. So Tyler turning to music wasn't just him, leaning on something emotionally.
Mm.
It was actually supported by what was happening in his brain. And there's more. A University of Miami study found that listening to music, just listening, can lower cortisol. And that's the hormone associated with stress and anxiety, right?
Right.
And it can release dopamine, which is the feel-good chemical, right? The one linked to pleasure and reward.
Right. So these physiological responses, what's happening in our bodies, further underscore that deep connection between music and our well-being. I mean, it's influencing us on a chemical level, not just in our minds.
Right. The study also found that music can lower blood pressure, it can reduce anxiety, and it can even improve our cognitive function, how our brains work. It makes you realize how all these benefits would have been crucial to someone like Tyler, someone navigating recovery and trying to get back on track.
It suggests that music can actually act as a holistic form of therapy, addressing both the psychological and physiological aspects of well-being. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It really is. So when Tyler turned to music to heal, he was tapping into something incredibly powerful, something that both his personal experience and now scientific research supports. Okay, so let's rewind a bit, go back in time, and talk about how Aerosmith even came to be. It was 1970 in Boston, right? 5 friends, they had some previous musical experience.
Yeah. And the formation of bands, it's often a story of shared passion, right? This desire to create something collectively. It's about individuals coming together, merging their talents, and forging this unified artistic vision.
Absolutely. And Tyler, he had played drums before, but he was adamant, like, I'm going to be a lead singer this time.
Yeah.
And, well, smart move, right? The other founding members were Joe Perry on guitar, Tom Hamilton on bass, Joey Kramer on drums, and get this, Kramer actually knew Tyler from childhood. They go way back.
Yeah.
And then there's a Ray Tabano on rhythm guitar. He was later replaced by Brad Whitford, who's a Berklee School of Music attendee. That's a big deal. Berklee is like a prestigious music college, known for producing just incredible musicians. So they had serious talent in that lineup right from the start.
And that dynamic between band members, they all come with their own backgrounds and aspirations. That really shapes the unique sound and the trajectory of a band, The way those personalities interact can be just as important as the musical talent itself.
And the story of how they actually got the name Aerosmith is pretty cool. Apparently, Joey Kramer, the drummer, was just doodling in his school notebooks, writing Aerosmith over and over. He was inspired by this Harry Nilsson album, Aerial Ballet, which, get this, was a tribute to Nilsson's grandparents, who were aerialists.
It's funny how these seemingly random inspirations can lead to these iconic names, right? Names that become synonymous with a band's entire identity. It's like this little spark that ignites something much bigger.
Right. And they considered some other, well, let's just say interesting names like Bananas, the Hookers, and Spike Jones. Can you imagine being a fan of the Bananas?
Aerosmith definitely has a better ring to it, for that rock and roll vibe.
Their first gig was in Mendon, Massachusetts, at Nipmuc Regional High School. Pretty humble beginnings for a band that would become so massive, right?
Yeah, and most successful bands, they start small, they hone their craft, they build a local following, and then if they're lucky, they get that wider recognition. It's a real testament to the power of those grassroots movements in music.
And, as we touched on earlier, even from those early days,
Uh-huh.
playing high school gigs, the band was experimented with substances.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme in a lot of rock and roll narratives, unfortunately. The pressures are immense, and the temptations, they're everywhere, especially for young artists in that kind of high energy, almost 24/7 environment.
Yeah, definitely. And while they found success early on, this persistent issue, the damn addictions, as one source put it, it really cast a shadow over their career.
It highlights that really delicate balance between creative energy, that drive to make music, and the potential for self-destruction. It's like walking a tightrope. So many artists struggle with this.
Okay, so let's talk about that darker side, the toxic twins. That nickname, it wasn't given lightly. It was earned by Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, and it was because of their intense drug and alcohol use. We're talking incidents of them convulsing on stage, really scary stuff, and causing just massive destruction in hotels. I mean, it was out of control.
And that level of substance abuse, it has profound consequences. It's not just the individuals involved, but the band, how it functions, its longevity. It's like this ripple effect of negativity just going outward.
And there's this one anecdote. It's called the Milk Incident. And it reportedly led to Joe Perry and Brad Whitford actually leaving the band in 1979. Apparently, tensions were so high, and it was all fueled by their addictions, that things just boiled over. The quote from one of our sources is, stuff flying, chairs flying, and things being thrown. I mean, can you imagine that chaos?
It really illustrates the volatile environment that you get when you have unchecked addiction within a group dynamic. Personal struggles, they inevitably bleed into professional relationships, and that makes collaboration, making music together almost impossible.
Yeah, totally. So Perry went off and did his own thing, the Joe Perry Project.
Yeah.
And Whitford formed a band called Whitford St. Holmes. But thankfully, this wasn't the end for the classic Aerosmith lineup. They both came back, rejoined the band in 1984.
Yeah. And that ability to reconcile, to reform, after that much internal strife, it speaks to the strong underlying bonds they must have had, and also their shared investment in Aerosmith's legacy. I mean, there had to be a powerful desire to recapture what they'd created together.
And that's exactly what happened. Their return marked a real turning point, a commitment to sobriety. Steven Tyler was the first to enter rehab in 1986, and it was their manager, Tim Collins, who really encouraged him to take that step.
It's often like that, isn't it? You need that external catalyst, that moment of clarity to initiate such a huge change. Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to see what needs to happen and give you that push.
And the rest of the band followed suit. They all got sober. And Collins, he made this incredibly bold promise. He told them that they could be the biggest band in the world, like the biggest, by 1990 if they got clean. Talk about motivation, right?
That kind of clear vision and having someone who believes in you like that, it can be so powerful, in driving individuals, and in this case, a whole band, towards positive change. It gives them a goal, something tangible to aim for.
And guess what? It actually happened. Their comeback was massive. It was marked by the album Permanent Vacation in 1987. This thing sold 5 million copies. That's huge. And it had hits like Dude, Looks Like a Lady, Rock This Way, and kind of ironically, Angel, which was almost like a chronicle of their reunion.
Yeah, the resurgence demonstrates the potential for renewal and reinvention, even after going through really difficult challenges. It's a testament to their talent as musicians, but also their willingness to confront those demons head on.
And you're not going to believe this. They toured with Guns N' Roses, GNR, were their opening act for 147 shows. Can you imagine that dynamic? Aerosmith trying to stay clean and sober, while GNR, well, they were just getting started in that world of excess.
It's a really interesting juxtaposition. You have these two bands at completely different stages of their careers, and in their relationship with fame and those temptations that come with it, I can only imagine the conversations that might have happened backstage.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Tyler's journey, and we can't wrap this up without talking about that voice, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's legendary. He has this extraordinary ability to hit those soprano ranges, apparently up to an E6, which is, I don't know, is that even humanly possible. It's beyond the standard C6. And they even compare it to the castrati. And just so everyone's on the same page, castrati historically were male singers who had vocal ranges equivalent to like sopranos or altos.
Right.
And it was a result of surgical procedures before puberty. So this comparison, it emphasizes just how extraordinary, how unusual the height and agility of his voice is. I mean, you rarely hear that, especially in rock music.
Yeah, his vocal range is truly exceptional. It's one of the key elements of Aerosmith's unique sound. And it's a physical instrument, right? It's something he's honed over decades of performing. It's a big part of what sets him apart.
And it's not just the range. A National Geographic documentary called The Incredible Human Machine actually studied his vocal cords while he was in concert, and they found that those things vibrate over 500,000 times during a single show. 500,000. And that's like covering the equivalent of 10 kilometers. That's insane, bro.
It's mind-blowing, and it gives you a real sense of the physical demands that are placed on a professional singer's vocal cords, especially someone like Tyler. It's like running a marathon with your voice every single night.
That's a great way to put it. It also explains some of the vocal issues he's faced later in his career, like that fractured larynx in 2023. That actually contributed to the band's farewell tour. And apparently, something as simple as a sneeze could potentially cause that kind of injury, given the extreme demands he's put on his voice over the years.
It reminds you of how delicate the human body is, even for someone with such incredible abilities. It really highlights the wear and tear that comes with that kind of intense use.
But even with all that, all those injuries and challenges, he's shown incredible resilience. I mean, he's recovered from numerous vocal hemorrhages throughout his career. It's like his voice has been forged in fire. I mean, both literally and figuratively.
His ability to bounce back from those physical setbacks, it speaks volumes about his dedication and the remarkable adaptability of the human body. He's a survivor, that's for sure.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, let's touch on some of the vocabulary, some of the words that really tie into everything we've been talking about. We have healing, that process of becoming healthy after you've been ill or injured. And think about music helping Steven Tyler heal after his struggles with addiction.
And addiction itself, that state of being physically or mentally dependent on something, and in Tyler's case, it was substances. His long battle with addiction is a central part of his story.
Right. And then there's resilience, that ability to bounce back from tough times. And Tyler's resilience is so evident in his ability to overcome addiction and all those vocal challenges.
Absolutely. And then you have therapy, treatment to help alleviate a disorder. And for Tyler, music was almost like this form of therapy, a way to process his emotions.
And finally, coping, dealing with something difficult. And music helped Tyler cope with his emotions, during his recovery and even during the band's really difficult internal struggles.
Yeah.
These words, they capture the core themes of his journey and the journey of Aerosmith as a band.
And understanding these terms, it gives us a framework for discussing this complex relationship between music and emotion and recovery. It gives us a shared language to understand these experiences.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so as we reflect on Steven Tyler's incredible story and, Aerosmith's wild ride, what stands out to you about the power of music in all of this?
Well, what's most striking to me is just how enduring music's connection is to our emotional lives. It's not just a fleeting trend or phase, it's a fundamental aspect of being human. It offers us solace, a way to express ourselves, and even a path towards healing, especially during those really challenging times. It's a testament to how deeply music affects us.
That is beautifully said. And it makes you think about your own relationship with music, doesn't it? How does music impact your emotions? Everyone listening, I bet you have songs that evoke really strong feelings in you, good or bad. What are those songs for you? And why do you think they have that power over you?
It raises an important question for each of us. Are we consciously using music as a tool for our own emotional well-being? Are we paying attention to how different sounds make us feel? Are we really listening to what music is doing to us?
Exactly. So for everyone listening out there, we challenge you to really consider that. Think about how you use music to cope with stress, sadness, any kind of difficult emotion, and maybe explore some different genres or artists, things you haven't listened to before, things that could give you peace or uplift you. You never know.
Experiment with different sounds and see what resonates with you emotionally. I mean, you might be surprised by what you discover about yourself and how music can affect you.
Right. Next time you're feeling overwhelmed or down, just try putting on a song that brings you comfort. It could be an old favorite, something you listened to as a kid or a new discovery. Just let that music work its magic. And, if you have your own stories about how music has helped you through tough times, we would love to hear them. Share them with us.
Yeah, and sharing those personal experiences, I think it highlights how universal this connection with music is. It reminds us that we're not alone in this. We all have these deep connections to sound and music.
Okay, so we're going to bring this deep dive to a close, but we want to leave you with a final thought. We've talked about this powerful interplay between music, emotion, and even the intense pressures of fame, especially when you look at Steven Tyler's story. What other seemingly destructive forces in our lives, things that we see as negative, might surprisingly hold the potential for healing and transformation? It really makes you wonder about finding strength in the most unexpected places.
It's a good reminder that, adversity, these difficult things that we go through, they can sometimes be the catalyst for really profound personal growth. It's in those challenging moments that we often discover our deepest reserves of strength and resilience.
That is so true. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the intersection of music and emotional well-being, and of course, all through the lens of Steven Tyler's incredible story. We hope you're leaving with a new appreciation for music, not just as entertainment, but as a real tool for healing and growth. And we're going to continue exploring these themes, personal growth and mental health, in future deep dives. So until then, keep exploring the music that resonates with your soul and keep growing in understanding.